All right, Rosie, you ready to do it?
I am.
All right, here we go. So five, four, three, two, one. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest Rosie McMahan. Rosie, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Rosie currently works at Mass Mentoring Partnership as a training and special projects manager, and she also owns and operates Optimistic Options, a private practice rooted in trauma-informed care and restorative justice principles. Her book, Fortunate Daughter, a Memoir of Reconciliation, was published in 2021 and was awarded first place in the Chanticleer International Book Awards in 2023. Not too shabby, Rosie. In this story, Rosie offers the reader a portrait of childhood sexual abuse, followed by the difficult and painful task of healing, a journey that in the end reveals a complicated and rare experience of repair, reconciliation, and the freedom that comes along with it. Rosie participates in community-based activities and attempting to eradicate inequities, and she brings personal experience and a solid understanding of the current research and findings to support and promote healing in all the work she does. Rosie, welcome.
Thank you.
So before we get going, share with our listeners, please, where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I love that question. You ask everybody that question, and I think we are always a little bit where we're from, right? Um, if not a lot. So I was born and raised uh, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, Somerville. And at the time that I was brought up there, the community was almost entirely Catholic, and you were either Irish Catholic or Italian Catholic, and it was, blue collar, working class. I emphasize this because it's true, but also because it's not like that anymore, and I know that, and I think these things have bearing, in terms
Hmm.
of not only your identity but your access to things like support and resources. And
Okay.
now I live just 2 hours west in the western part of the state of Massachusetts.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So let's dive in here. How the heck did all this start?
So I a long time ago started writing, and I think I did that for a few reasons, but one of the reasons is that it allowed me to reflect, and I think reflection is part of healing for anybody. And I did that for a while, and then I became more and more aware that I wanted to write about the experience that I had um, of trauma, of healing and reconciliation. But I had to get sort of kind of on the other side of it, if you will, to have what I think is needed as far as perspective goes. And it took me many years, but I wrote it. I wrote it a lot. I wrote it over and over again. I wrote it in
You wrote it,
companionship.
meaning your experience?
Yeah, the
It.
experience of,
Okay.
it sort of, and I didn't know if I was going to write a novel or if I was going to write a memoir. But it sort of became obvious that it needed to be a memoir. And then after finishing it, I still had to make the choice to publish it. Uh, and and I'm not the only one deciding, right? So I pursued that, and that happened, and here we are. It's 2024, and the book came out,
All right. Hang on.
a
Let
year into COVID.
let
Yeah.
me interrupt you if I may, because how did you get to the point where and when you realized you had been traumatized, you had been abused?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I think I always knew that that I was being raised in a family that had many events, if you will, and a lot of them falling into the category of trauma and abuse. And I actually think we're born sort of intact and whole, and when we're not being treated well, we know it. We may deny it, but we know it, and and I knew it. And that then was confirmed in efforts that I made um, to to heal from the abuse. And one thing that may not be clear, because I don't name the helpers in my story, is, and I'm saying this to you because it's true, and also because you interviewed this therapist, Dr. Judith Herman and her colleague, Emily Schatzow. They were the therapists who intervened in my family's
Oh,
life.
wow.
Yeah, so that's a big deal, right? Um, and uh, and they were significant in regards to my healing journey. So when did I know? I always knew. And sometimes, when you're in a difficult situation and you're trying to make sense of it, if you're not able to get out of it, which most children in most families are not, uh, or the rescue doesn't really succeed in removing you from harm, because then there are other things that happen when you get removed from a family. But uh, when you can't get out, it can be hard to reconcile your knowledge of being wronged by the harm doers,
Hmm.
and not being able to leave that situation. Uh, and I sort of try to remember that, or I do remember that in my own life as well as in the work that I've done.
My question, when did you know? And your response, you kind of always know, I think is to the point. In our bodies, right? We always know. In our heart of hearts, we always know. Was there a point? I mean, as a young kid, were you going about your life uh with cognitively, intellectually, with this knowledge? Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I would say so.
And I ask
And
that, if I may, I ask that because a lot of people, or many people don't, right? They just go about their lives and yet they fall into a depression or they become addicted and they kind of don't cognitively, it hasn't registered yet. Maybe
Yeah,
somatically.
it's interesting. I mean, I think maybe there's a distinction here between sort of what we know consciously and what we sort of discover in our pursuit of becoming sort of who we are meant to be. And injury and repeated injury and lack of access to help to cope with that injury compounds all those difficulties. But I am somebody, generally speaking, who thinks that no matter your response to the harm, you're always you're always aware on some level, and maybe you hide that from yourself. Again, it's hard, again, if you can't get out, or if you distract yourself with other things, or life just happens, right? You have to go to school, you have to work, you partner with somebody, you have children. I mean, all these things that can contribute both to the increased awareness, but also the increased likelihood that you can ignore something. But what you don't deal with, in my belief, doesn't just magically go away.
Mm.
Yeah, it needs to be addressed. I don't know if everybody will know what I'm doing when I do that, but that's speaking to my age here.
You did the what was it?
The
The
genie.
the
Yeah,
genie, right?
yeah,
The I Dream of Genie kind of wink
yeah,
and folded
yeah.
arms thing.
It just doesn't work like that, right?
So, all right, you're 15, 16 years old. How are you managing? How are you dealing with this?
Well, at that point in time, I think I did what a lot of young adults do. And I always was mature for my age. I don't know if I was born like that, or if I sort of decided, okay, that's going to be a good way to be. But during my adolescence and into my early 20s, I think I acted out a lot, with drug use, with sexual behaviors. Uh, I was vulnerable to being injured by another harm doer, this guy who was directing the youth program that I was a part of. And I went in and out of therapy. Uh, I've been in therapy a lot. I'm not currently in therapy, but um, I did a lot of things. I mean, I had a lot of fun, but I took a lot of chances, and I did things that put me in harm's way. And I think this is not like unique to my perspective. I think when we're doing that, I think often we are, as they say, recreating, in a sense, the the stakes, if you will,
Hmm.
and trying to have a different outcome.
Hmm.
And it was sort of in my early 20s that I returned to therapy and enlisted my parents in that pursuit, and was able to participate in this thing that at the time was called a confrontation, but that I defined really as a reconciliation.
And you brought your parents into this therapy specifically to deal with what had been going on, the abuse that had been going on.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
Because it was kind of a shit show. I mean, in terms of like, when you are in a family where there is abuse of any kind, but let's talk specifically about childhood sexual abuse. My father was an active alcoholic. He was emotionally abusive, physically abusive, and sexually abusive towards me, and that affected me, and it affected everybody else in the family. Uh, but you often are met with kind of two choices. You either stay in your family and pretend nothing happened and sort of leave the holiday gatherings kind of sick to your stomach, um, or you leave that family. But that leaving, even if it is a completely legitimate choice, comes at a great cost. To give up one's family is like a hard choice to make, one that
Mhm.
many people do make and that I support. But there was this other road I was being offered by the insight of Dr. Judith Herman and Emily Schatzow. And that was, can we get your parents to participate in this formal confrontation process? And I didn't know, but when I asked them, they agreed. And then we were both prepared, at least as much as one can, for what that would actually be like. And it's interesting. Judy Herman, Dr. Judith Herman, uh, she was was always uh, sort of, I would say, mostly concerned, her and Emily both, with making sure that I wasn't going to do this with any certainty about what might happen. So all of the work that I was doing to prepare for it was centered around my speaking truth to power, just me speaking truth to power. In this case, the power being my parents. Um, and I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't living at home. I mean, how much power did they really have? Well, my parents, you know, they're significant people in our lives. So I did that, and then they responded. And I'm going to say this because as far as I know, I mean, I've spent almost my whole life looking for somebody else who's had the experience I've had. And lots of people have trauma and difficulty and abuse, and lots of people heal. But I haven't met anybody who had an experience of reconciliation via the confrontation that I did. And by that, I'm referring to the genuine remorse that my parents communicated to me, and this is equal in significance, and um, amend making. And even Judy and Emily were, I think, I don't know if surprised is the right word, but they were also aware that the response my parents gave, my father being the person who was the harm doer, as far as the actual abuse, and my mother for not intervening to protect, right? Uh, but it was sort of a showstopper in all of our lives. I think in the lives of the professionals who were helping us, in the lives of my parents, in my life, in the lives of my siblings. And it was a real turning point.
M-
So,
One
yeah.
second. So this confrontation, quote unquote, it's the five of you, Judith and
No, oh, well, yes. Okay. So in the confrontation, it's actually Judith Herman prepared my parents after they agreed to participate, and Emily Schatzow prepared me. And then in the confrontation, it's myself with Emily, my therapist, and my parents without any support. I mean, they got support before and after, but they were just there as the people who were my parents. And we all sort of went through the whole process together.
and was this the first time you had said anything about this to your parents?
I mean, um, I would say no, not the first time,
Okay.
but the first time that I was doing it in this constructed and constructive
Got
way,
it.
right?
Got it. Um,
No, it was a
wow,
gift. It was a
it
gift,
sounds
you know?
very intense.
Yeah,
Confrontation is an interesting title. One could say it's it's extreme, it's harsh, but you could also say, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. No, it's more adversarial, let's use that word, than I think a lot of people who participate in restorative justice. But bear in mind that Judith Herman, Emily Schatzo, the practice they belong to, um, they were also feminists, and they recognized that there was not only this power imbalance that had been abused, uh, there was a need to balance out the scales, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so is it, guaranteed that out of a confrontation you're going to get a reconciliation? No, no. And what I was trying to say about like looking for this story somewhere else, which I think is part of the reason that I wrote and published it. I'm still looking for that story somewhere else, and I'm still offering this story, to the world, if you will. But I I think that and I'm not even yet talking about like the forgiveness that can happen, because that's a separate thing, also not guaranteed or even essential. But I think that the the reconciliation part of it, well, it just can't be underestimated in the value that it has had in my life, and is really the main reason that I published the story. Like sometimes people will hear like briefly what my story is about, and the first thing they'll say is, "I'm so sorry." And I receive the apology, and I thank somebody who says it to me. Many people have. And then I say, but to be clear, my story is not a tragedy. And I think we have this attachment to stories about trauma and abuse as a culture, that they're tragedies, and that even if you figure out a way to sort of survive and get through it, um, that it's really too bad. And of course, it's horrible to be injured, and it's horrible to be in a family as a child. But that doesn't really capture the story that I
Mm-hmm.
have to tell, and that I would like to be more available to other people.
Okay, so how old were you when that confrontation went down?
I don't know the exact age. It's so funny. I just turned 60 a couple weeks ago. So it's like, okay, in your whole life to this point. But I was in my early 20s.
Okay, so uh, jump to the book, Fortunate Daughter, A Memoir of Reconciliation. Why did you write the book? What was the impetus for that, the inspiration for that?
I mean, aside from my own healing and the value that writing and reflection has in a healing journey, I wanted to insert the story into the dialogue of restorative relationships, restorative justice, um, because it's the truth. The truth is, this happened. I was hurt, I healed, and as part of my healing, I was able to reconcile. And let's fold into this that I also, maybe not coincidentally, went into a field where, like my whole adult life, I've been working with young people and their families in all these different capacities: educator, counselor, trainer. But I've always held the view that whatever is going on for young people, whatever their struggles might be, uh, that that they can that they can get through it. And and I actually believe that even if you don't have willing cooperation on the part of your harm doers, you can have an imagined uh, confrontation and reconciliation. And that too, I mean, having my own father and mother be sorry and then make amends. I mean, my goodness, what's better than that? But
Hmm.
but you can also create that, and that can become part of. You talk about the cells in our body and our mind and in our heart, like that too contributes to genuine healing. Healing that doesn't sort of involve permanent scarring, if you will, to stay with the metaphor, right?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, uh, I think, comes at the typical response in a kind of 90-degree angle. way, many people, like you said, culturally, yes, we hear these stories and we're like, holy crap,
Yeah.
that is tragic and awful. And you're saying, you're not denying that, of course, but you're saying, well, hang on, there's another option here. There's another way of doing this. Are you suggesting that um, in many ways, people aren't looking at this option of healing, that uh, therapeutically, this option isn't being taken into consideration, or what?
Great question. Um, I think that um, we dramatically underestimate uh, ourselves, and we also don't um, consider what ways the story can have a different ending. And I know this because, like, for a long time, like when I was starting my work, it's more popular now. Popular, I don't know if that's the right word, but to have lived experience, it's now okay to include that. I was thinking about you, on your website talking about the brother who, came back as a survivor himself of another kind of trauma. Um, but like when I entered the field, like I had to never tell the story about
Mhm.
my personal experience. In fact, if I did, it would be viewed as clinically inappropriate, right? So then time goes by, things change, and all of a sudden, it's now sort of more okay for people to say, actually, to be authentically me doing the job that I'm doing, helping people heal, it would be kind of ludicrous to not point to this dramatic experience of healing that I had and not admit or point to the fact that that has greatly influenced my belief in healing. That said, when people find out about my abuse, I haven't encountered anybody really disbelieving that, not in my adult life and certainly not in my professional life. But there is something that gets called into question about my credibility. And people really want to um, sort of look at whether or not I'm telling the truth about what happened in my own healing experience with my parents, albeit orchestrated by these phenomenal therapists. That is this thing that people really have some skepticism about. And
About the
they
healing
about
process?
the healing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
so that's this thing. I hope I'm answering your question, but something about the way you asked it made me realize this is how I know that it's not available enough, because I think we still want our victims to be victims and we still want our perpetrators to be perpetrators. I mean, the other thing that happens is people really ask me a lot, and when I do book reading events, like, you know how do you know that your father was sorry? How do you know? And I mean, I wrote a book, you can read it, I can tell you about it, you can believe me or not. But, like, the harm doers are also denied a lot of what should be offered to them as well on both sides of the equation. Not everybody, of course, but a lot of people who've been injured don't want to have, like, I used to talk about myself as a trauma survivor. Okay, yes, I'm a trauma survivor, but I'm also a healing activist. In fact, I would say I'm more identified as a healing activist now than I am as a trauma. Are they connected? Sure. But my parents, they also wanted to heal. That's that's in large part what drove their own bravery. I mean, I think the bravery they had to have for participating in this reconciliation
No
was
doubt.
maybe greater than my own. They didn't know that what they were getting into, right?
Right. I think, you use the word skepticism. I could understand that. I mean, and I think because the majority of people who've experienced abuse don't experience that type of healing, that type, let alone that type of confrontation,
Right.
right? I don't know if I've ever had anyone else on the podcast, certainly who's been helped by Judith Herman in that way,
Yeah.
you know, but it's not in the common parlance of treatment. It certainly isn't. Oftentimes the majority of people don't even say anything for years and years and years, are rarely even consciously aware of it, let alone get to the point where they're able to constructively begin the healing process. So what you're talking about is, I mean, unusual, amazing that you've been able to have that experience. How did you first get in contact with Judith Herman? How did that come about?
I know this is like, talk about like, I'm assuming something here about our age demographics, but the early 70s, mid 70s, late 70s, what a time, because there was like the whole sort of obvious 1960s Black power, civil rights, feminism, but in the wake of that, including where I was born and raised, there were all these radical hippie healer people that just entered my life, and still, choices were made, but my sister ended up talking to an adult at an Alateen meeting who said, oh, there's this mental health practice that you might want to check out. My mom would take us to these appointments. Little did we know, it was like one thing leading to another.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was the context of a time
Mm-hmm.
when, and I was thinking about Judith Herman, Bessel, like these people that I really believe are geniuses in regards to what they know and what they do and how committed they are to helping people. So there's, you, the individual, but we're always in a circumstance. And that circumstance is always going to have more or less options, resources, supports. And it's never just, like if my story is rare, and I believe that it is, I don't want it to be. I want
Mm-hmm.
more people to have this option. And I don't want it to be just random. And I don't want it to just be like, you know, uh, elusive. I want it to
Mm-hmm.
be more common that people have the opportunity to get the kind of support I received, which then allowed me and my parents and my family to move through. And, another thing, just in regards to childhood sexual abuse, which you might know, I'm guessing you might, is there's a legacy, and I grew up knowing, oh shit, like, am I going to grow up and am I going to become, a prostitute? Am I, there are all
Mm-hmm.
these, ideas of myself that I had. Um, and I'm saying that because uh, I don't think you necessarily get a choice in what you're handed, but you do get a choice in what you do with what you've been
Mm-hmm.
handed. But you can't do that alone. You have to do that with skilled people, with people who really know how to help you. And Judy and Emily are not the only people who helped, um, but they were very prominent in my healing. Um, so. Uh, Legacy, just what ways we feel like we can become who we want to be, that is not just this, you come from this family. My ACE score, my adverse childhood experience score, I remember the first time I did it, I was at a training learning about it, and I did it, and I was like, oh my God, I've got a 7 out of 10. I'm doomed,
Right, right, right,
uh, but I'm not. I
right.
haven't been,
So you talked about this other option, and when you say that, are you specifically referring to this confrontation?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Let me ask you something as we kind of get ready to close down here. Again, the book is called Fortunate Daughter, a Memoir of Reconciliation. It was published in 2021 and was awarded first place in the Chanticleer International Book Awards of 2023. Um, Rosie, you know, in the wake of everything you've shared here, what do you feel? What do you believe? What do you know to be what you want to give and get out? What's your mission, in a sense, in the work you're doing?
Well, I think that um, in all my work, which now is 40 plus years, when I encounter a young person, when I encounter their family, I have a basic assumption that I am uh, I am meeting somebody who is not permanently injured. That whatever they might have gone through, whatever they might be recreating, there is a way in which I can hold this idea of them as being not just capable of healing, but of wanting to heal.
Mhm.
And if in any of the counseling I've done, or the training, or the teaching, if I can make it more clear to people that this is the truth, um, I think that's doing something pretty large. Uh, and the book is part of that. And the book
Mm.
is definitely part of that for me. It's a big part of it, frankly, um, because in writing the story and publishing it, and in going out doing podcasts and doing readings, I am sharing the truth of what I experienced, and then the impact that it's had on the work that I've been able to do.
Awesome. What's the best way for people to contact you?
So I work at an organization called Massachusetts Mentoring Partnership, but I also have um, a website that includes a podcast, and you can go to Optimistic Options, and there's a link for that, which maybe can be included in whatever you share with folks about me and my story. And yeah, um, Optimistic Options, Fortunate Daughter. Um, the book is selling, and I can be contacted through my email, and that's available at my website as well.
Okay. We'll have those linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Your podcast, what's the name of it?
Heart to Heart.
Heart to Heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
I'm terrible at doing marketing, so I have to get better at it. But it is, yeah, it's a great podcast with over a dozen interviews, and
awesome.
yeah,
We'll
it's
have that
great.
linked. We'll have that linked up here too. Very cool. You've had Judith on, Emily Schatzow on, Donna Jensen on. She's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, right,
Um,
you know Donna Jensen too, right? Yeah.
yep, yep, yep. Very cool. We'll have that linked up here. So awesome meeting you and talking to you. Damn, you're inspiring.
Thank you.
Love
Thank
to
you,
have you
Matt.
back.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great talking with you.
All
Really
right.
great.
We'll be in
Yeah.
touch.
All right. Thank you,
Take
dear.
care.